The dusty town of Redstone stood still that evening, the sun hanging low like a watchful eye over its wooden streets. The air was thick with heat and judgment as townsfolk gathered around the square, whispering behind calloused hands. In the center stood a young woman, her wrists bound tightly to a wooden post, the rough rope cutting into her skin. Her dress, once clean, was now stained with dirt and humiliation. "Please let me go," she cried, her voice trembling through the silence. But the sheriff turned away, his jaw tight, his pride stronger than mercy. They said she had stolen bread from the general store, a crime that in Redstone carried more shame than punishment. The crowd didn't care that her father had died in the mines, that her mother lay sick in a cabin with no medicine, or that hunger drove her to desperation. They only cared for a spectacle, a sinner to throw their stones at, a reminder that the town's rules were bigger than human hearts. From the far edge of the crowd, a man watched quietly. His hat cast a shadow over his eyes, his jaw hard, his leather vest dusty from the long ride. He was a stranger to most, but to a few, they whispered his name with respect. Caleb Hart, the ex-soldier turned rancher, a man who'd seen more war than peace, more pain than justice. He didn't belong to the gossip of Redstone, but something in the young woman's voice made him move through the crowd. Each step he took echoed louder than the murmurs, until the people began to part, unsure whether to stop him or let him pass. He stood before her now, his eyes meeting hers, eyes full of tears and defiance. "You don't know what you're doing," she said through broken breath, her wrists raw from struggle. Caleb didn't answer. He simply looked at the sheriff and said in a voice that silenced the square, "Untie her." The sheriff frowned, his hand hovering over his holster. "She broke the law, Hart. Ain't your business." But Caleb's gaze didn't waver. "Then make it mine," he replied. The air grew colder despite the sun's fire. The townsfolk murmured, torn between curiosity and fear. The sheriff stepped closer, his authority cracking beneath the weight of Caleb's calm. "You'd go against Redstone for a thief?" he hissed. Caleb's jaw tightened. "I'd go against any man who ties up a starving woman just to feel powerful." Then, without waiting for permission, he reached forward and cut the rope with his knife. The girl stumbled forward into his arms, her breath shaking, her body trembling from exhaustion. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Caleb steadied her, his hand firm but gentle on her shoulder. "What's your name?" he asked softly. "Anna," she whispered, still catching her breath. "Anna Cole," he nodded. "Anna, you're coming with me," the sheriff barked. "You can't just take her." But Caleb turned his head slowly, eyes dark with warning. "You want to stop me?" The sheriff hesitated, then spat on the ground and walked away, his pride stung but his courage gone. The crowd began to disperse, muttering about justice and scandal, but Caleb didn't care. He led Anna away from the square, the ropes falling to the dirt like old sins. They walked down the quiet road toward his horse, the evening wind brushing against them. Anna spoke softly, guilt heavy in her voice. "You shouldn't have done that." "They'll come after you." Caleb smiled faintly. "Let them. I fought worse than their gossip." He lifted her onto his horse and climbed behind her, steadying her as they rode toward the setting sun. For the first time in days, she felt the warmth of something other than shame, freedom. The prairie opened before them like a promise, the golden light washing away the dust of the past. When they reached his ranch, a humble cabin stood beneath a great oak, smoke rising from its chimney. Caleb dismounted and helped her down gently. "You can rest here," he said, leading her inside. The cabin was simple but clean, wooden floors, a warm fire, and the faint smell of coffee. Anna looked around, confused. "Why did you help me?" she asked. He looked into the fire for a long moment before answering. "Because I once had a sister. The world broke her the same way it tried to break you. I couldn't save her. But maybe I can save you." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't deserve saving," she whispered. Caleb turned to her, his expression softening. "Everyone does." That night, as the stars blinked awake in the velvet sky, Anna sat by the window, her wrists free, her heart still heavy but beating with new hope. Caleb watched her from across the room, his hat resting on the table, his eyes thoughtful. He knew the town wouldn't forget what he'd done, but he also knew he'd do it again without a second thought. Because sometimes the hardest battles weren't fought with bullets, but with compassion. And as the firelight flickered across their faces, a quiet understanding grew between them, something fragile, something real. She turned to him, voice trembling. "What happens now?" Caleb smiled gently. "Now you start over. And if anyone tries to chain you again—" He paused, meeting her gaze. "They'll have to go through me." Outside, the wind carried away the echoes of the crowd, leaving only the sound of freedom and the faint beating of two hearts that refused to give up on Grace.